Welcome to Revive Online. Here in a second, I'm going to introduce my co-hosts. But first, I wanted to give you a really important announcement, and I wanted to put it at the beginning of the video to make sure that everyone heard this. Next week is Easter. Obviously, we're so excited for Easter. Christ is risen. I'm excited to spend a whole day celebrating our resurrected Savior. I am, of course, just like you, disappointed that we can't get together under one roof. The Easter Sunday for your staff is like a Super Bowl Sunday for a football player. We look forward to it all year. I look forward to meeting the people you invite. I look forward to seeing all our people together at the same time. I look forward to the epic worship. Really, Easter is one of the highlights of our year, and I'm bummed we don't get to meet together. But we have an idea that I think is going to be really deep and meaningful and powerful, but it's going to take a little bit of setup. So here's the plan for Easter this year. We're hoping that you will invest some time this week and buy a few groceries. I'll tell you what these are in just a second. And then have those at home. There's a little bit of preparation, not a ton, you can do this. A little bit of preparation. And then Sunday morning, we'll release a video that takes this Passover dinner with you. So you can gather your family around the table. If you're single, we're inviting you to Zoom with somebody so you're not doing this alone. It really is a celebration dinner. And we will take this Passover dinner together. And it will be about an hour, so we go one step at a time. We talk about the symbolism and remember what God did for the Israelite people in pulling them out of slavery. And then, of course, we'll bring that into modern Christianity and talk about how Christ has pulled us out of the slavery of sin. I think it's going to be really, really great. So here is what you need. Starting with this side, if you can find lamb, that's really cool that you have lamb that we can take together. If not, chicken or beef or whatever you find, but find some type of meat. We got this at the corner of Eagle and Fairview at the huge Albertsons, and they had grass-fed lamb. So there's that. You have apples, walnuts, and raisins. These will all go together in sort of this little salady thing. This is parsley. You don't need near this much. You just dip it in some salt water for one step, but you need a little bit of parsley. This might be a little bit tough to find. This is matzo bread. You can make your own, which we'll be doing today in our video, or you can buy this. Again, we got it at the same place, Eagle and Fairview, the Main Street Albertsons. Grape juice, and lastly, horseradish. Comes in a jar like this. You can get a small jar of that. So your goal this week, again, we'll make this list available, is to get these ready to go, to get these purchased sometime this week. If you don't feel like getting out, you can probably order everything but the lamb on Amazon and have it delivered in plenty of time. But we will sit down together and walk through the Passover the Seder dinner, as it's called. I think it's going to be really, really great. So that's coming up on Easter Sunday. You do not want to miss it. It's going to be awesome. We're also going to try to do some worship and a couple of other things to make it feel a little bit more like an Easter Sunday service. Again, I think it's going to be awesome. So we will do that this coming Sunday. Welcome to Food and Faith Week 3. My first week, my beautiful, brilliant wife, Tammy, was here with me, and we talked about making sure you put the right ingredients into whatever you're making. So even though we're stuck at home, I just encourage us all to spend some time putting in good ingredients in our life, to think on whatever is good and noble and righteous, that we would invest our time thinking about some good things because we're being inundated by so many negative things. Week 2, my oldest son Daxton joined me. This was last week. The two of us talked about we have to make sure that we wait well. So just because we're waiting doesn't mean we're wasting. And I had an amazing week last week. Of the 5 days, I ate 2 meals with my family every day but one. Thursday night, my wife and I had a date night through Panda Express drive-thru. It was really romantic. We had an awesome time. But besides that, I ate lunch and dinner with my family every day, and I'm trying not to waste my time. So we want to wait well. And then Daxton spent a little bit of time making sure that our waiting doesn't turn into complaining. And I loved what he said about by the time we start complaining, it means we've already given up. So we don't want to give up. So that has been our first 2 weeks. Now on week 3 today, I want to invest time talking about God is still moving. God is still changing lives and doing great things. And we're going to see that from a handful of different perspectives today. I want you to know, just because you and I are sort of waiting around or stuck in this little groundhog loop that we're in, that God is not, that he still has direction and purpose and something he wants for all of us. I believe that with all my heart. So my first 2 hosts today will be my daughter Taylin and son number 3, Desden. If you guys want to come join me, I want to show you something. Taylin is 5. In the 2 minutes it took me to say that, she has already wandered out the door. Here she is, Miss Taylin. Yay, I got you a stool. All right. So I have this Dole banana. Has this been opened on that end?
No.
Has this been opened on this end?
No.
Okay. Taylin, if you were going to cut up this banana, how would you cut it up?
So I would open the banana.
Okay.
I would put the banana on this table, and then I would get a butter knife, and then I would chop the banana.
That's probably how most people would do it. Desmond, do you have any creative ideas on how you would cut this banana up?
I wouldn't, because I don't eat bananas.
Desmond says he wouldn't because he doesn't eat bananas. Now, again, I want you to see that I'm about to open this banana, but I want you to see it's never been opened. Do you see any places it's been opened before?
Wait.
All right.
But it's okay.
Well, I want us to do this. I want you to take this, and I want you to pretend you're cutting it with your finger. Just go whoosh. I want you to put 4 cuts. 1 cut right here. Can you do that? Whoosh. And then 1 cut right here. Whoosh. And 1 cut right here. Whoosh. Okay. Now we're going to open this banana.
Can I do it for real?
Yeah, here we go. Look at that.
I'm going to get the butter knife.
Well, you don't need the butter knife. Come here. I'm going to show you a trick.
I'm just going to get it just
All right.
in case.
Just in case. All right, look. There's already a cut right there, right where you made it. Let's see if there's another cut. There's another cut right there where you made it. And there should be 1 more cut. Let's see. There's another cut right there where you made it.
Is that magic? You're a magic magician.
Now,
Oh, that's...
look right here. Those are the cuts that you made, and they were already in the banana. Can you tell me how that happened?
No.
Destin, do you have any ideas how we did that?
No.
Wait!
All right, what do you got?
So, I think this is how it happened. I think that I go so hard, my fingernail accidentally got in it a little bit, and then when I did notice it, there was a little line there, and it cut it a little bit.
Maybe.
I'm not sure how it got the cuts inside there, but you told her where to cut, so...
So I manipulated the trick a little bit.
Yeah, I
Well-
don't know how you got the cuts in there, though, so...
Here's the point. Sometimes God is moving. All right, that's enough. Perfect. Sometimes you can eat one. That would actually be great, because if you have food in your mouth, you might talk a little bit less. So when God is moving, sometimes we don't see him moving. Sometimes on the surface, it looks like nothing is happening. But when you go underneath, you see that God is actually still in the process of moving and doing good things. I I love you too. Can you guys think of any ways that God might be moving right now through this coronavirus? Is there anything good that you're seeing happen? Yes, Taylor.
The coronavirus is I kind of like the coronavirus because now we don't have to go to school, and we're allowed to stay with our family and play and stuff, and we don't really have to work that hard, and so we can do even funner things.
Good.
After
Is there anything spiritually good? Is there anything?
What does spiritually mean?
Spiritually means, is there anything God is teaching us? Or do you see God doing anything during this time?
God is maybe giving us a break, maybe.
Yeah, maybe he's forcing some of us to have a Sabbath because we never take them. We've been saving up our Sabbaths for the last decade and putting them all together. Marker, yes. Does anything you can think of that God is doing spiritually right now?
Like probably giving scientists good ideas about gears.
Yeah, God is moving through the scientists, helping us figure things out. Well, awesome. Well, I'm going to talk with your brother Dreas here in just a second, but I want you guys to remember that God is still in the business of changing lives and changing hearts and cutting bananas even when we don't see it. All right? All right. Welcome back to the kitchen. I am here with son number 2. This is Dreas Jefferson Taylor. Jefferson is after my Uncle Jeff. And Dreas is going to join us today. He's also the best cook in our family. So he's going to help us make some matzo rolls. And I'll give you the recipe. So if you want to make these for your Seder dinner next week, you absolutely can. We're going to be talking today about sometimes God is moving, but we don't see it. Sometimes God is moving, but we don't realize that he has an agenda that's different than the pain points that we're living in. So this is kind of a tough teaching, but I believe it's really relevant for what you and I are going through right this minute. So before I read this passage to you, Dre, would you give us kind of a synopsis of what was happening in the book of Exodus up into maybe the where we get the term Passover. So give us the big picture story.
Okay, so at the starting of the story, we see that the Israelites have been enslaved, and they've been enslaved for lots of years, but now Pharaoh is commanding every single man to now work as slaves for free to build. So Moses is born, and he lives inside the palace. One day he rides out, and he hears an Israelite man being beaten. He goes out, and he strikes out in anger against the slave driver who was hurting the man. He killed him, and so he ran away from the palace and from Egypt. After a while, he becomes a sheep herder. So he is one day going off with his sheep, and he finds a burning bush. And this is when God talks to Moses. He tells him that he wants him to go back to Egypt, and that he wants him to confront Pharaoh. So he goes out, and he confronts the Pharaoh, and then Pharaoh says, "No, you cannot take the Israelites. So now that he's been told no, God gives Moses the power to send out the 10 plagues against Pharaoh. So as these 10 plagues go forward, Pharaoh keeps on saying, yes, you can have the people, but the second the plague ends, Pharaoh takes back what he says, and eventually all the cattle are killed, and the Israelites are not affected. And as we keep on going through, eventually, the firstborn of every single family was to die. The Israelites, the Egyptians, everyone, unless they painted a lamb's blood on their doorpost. So everyone did this, except for most of the Egyptians. And the Pharaoh did not do this either. And so his first son died. And can you sort of tell us how important the first son, the firstborn of a family is to people?
Yeah. We know from, not biblically speaking, but historically speaking, that the Pharaoh at the time of the plagues had two children, one son and one daughter. Again, that's extra biblical, it's just historical knowledge. And so this would have been Pharaoh's only son, and ultimately would have been the next Pharaoh. He would have been heir to the throne, if you will. So this idea of Pharaoh's son being taken from him is pretty severe.
Yeah, and just like God had predicted, right after that, he sends Moses away with all the Israelites, all the cattle, all the women, all the men.
So one of the things I learned recently, Dre, is that the people didn't put their own blood on the doorposts. That the elders of the Israelites came and did this for all the houses, because you and I as slaves wouldn't have had permission. We wouldn't have had lambs. We didn't have access to that sort of thing. And so the elders did this for us, would cover our doors if we wanted to. I'm sure we could get out of it, but who wouldn't want that? And so then the death angel comes through, and when it sees blood on the doorpost, it would pass over our house. So the judgment is coming, but for those of us with blood on their doorpost, the judgment passes over us, which is obvious in its symbolism for New Testament Christianity. All right, so what else? What happens after that?
After that, just as God had predicted, Pharaoh becomes stricken with grief, and he sends out Moses, and he says, take all the Israelites, everything that they own. And so Moses does, and he takes all of them, and he heads out until they get stopped by the Red Sea. By now, God has already hardened Pharaoh's heart again after many of the plagues when he changed his mind. So Pharaoh, he decides to send out his guards to go and get back the Israelites. By now, all the Israelites and Moses are stuck at the Red Sea, and everybody starts complaining against Moses, and Moses, with God giving him the strength, God parts the Red Seas for them, and they make it across safely, and then they're inside the wilderness.
Awesome. Dre, that was awesome. Nailed it. So imagine you're one of the Israelites and these plagues start. The Nile turns to blood. The Israelites would have had to have dealt with that, right? That would affect you too. And then you have the frogs that show up everywhere. In fact, there's There's even a little passage where it talks about the frogs were so everywhere that even in the Pharaoh's palace, in his bedroom, in his bed, there were frogs. It says that. You can look it up. And then the third plague is the flies. When this is happening, you and I as Israelites, we would have dealt with this same thing. Like we would have had to deal with some really bad consequences because God has a bigger plan, because God is trying to do something. I want to read you a passage here. This is after Pharaoh has said for the 10th time, feel free to go, but then he changes his mind. He's now going to chase them down. It says in verse 5, when the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their mind about them and said, what have we done? We have let the Israelites go and have lost their services. In other words, they're no longer slaves to us. They're upset. So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots, along with all other chariots of Egypt, with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites, who were marching out, and it adds this word, boldly. They were marching out boldly. And you can't blame them. After seeing these 10 plagues, your faith would be so incredibly strong that God is moving and they're marching out. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen, and troops pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi-Hahiroth, opposite of Baal-Zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified, as we all would be, and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians, let us remain slaves? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. But Moses answered the people, do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You only need to be still. I think it's important for us as we sit in the middle of this story and realize that they are in a really dire place. But God hasn't forsaken them. God hasn't left them. God didn't forget about them. He had a plan. I believe that is true for all of us, that God has a plan for you, that God has a plan for me. Even in this chaos, God has a plan. Now, here is where I have to teach something that is uncomfortable and not necessarily easy to teach. One of the challenges is God's plans, God's priority, God's agenda is different than my plans and my priorities and my agenda. My priorities are to get out of the house. My priorities are to be able to go out and eat with my wife again instead of doing romantic drive-thrus. I have priorities. God's plans and ways are different than ours. And maybe, just maybe during this time, God is doing some incredible things in our marriages as we're stuck at home with our spouses, in our families as we spend time with our kids. Maybe for some of us, it has been years since you had a Sabbath, since you took one day a week and dedicated it to God and rested. And maybe you've been saving up all these days off and God is finally forcing you to take them. I don't know what God is trying to do in your life, but I can tell you in my life, I've seen some amazing things these last 2 weeks because of the circumstances I'm in. That includes some incredible phone calls with some of you. That is even more text messages back and forth on what God is doing. This is me spending a lot more time a lot more time with my kids. This is me filming videos with my family. This has been a time where I have been able to grow closer to my wife and closer to my family. And I believe that is good. I believe God may be orchestrating some amazing things in our lives, even though the circumstances seem dire. There have been some really great examples of the way God is moving. Not only supernaturally moving, man, I've had some great conversations with some of us about our own humanity and how some of these chaos moments help us remember who's on the throne and who's not. But even beyond the supernatural stuff, I'm seeing God move amongst his people. I read a story, this is from February, so it's a month and a half old, but it talked about a church in China near a town that is right by the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak. And this church, this large donation, put together this gift to help with the coronavirus. And they put together, are you ready for this? It says, China's religious believers have jumped into the national battle against the coronavirus. They have offered prophecies and prayers, ceremonies and services, as well as donations totaling more than $30 million. The effort reflects the country's decade-long religious revival and a feeling among many Chinese that faith-based groups provide an alternative to the corruption that has plagued the government. I love that God is using the underground church, a place where you're not even supposed to publicly profess Christianity. And God is using the underground church to serve the country. And rest assured, people are going to talk about that. And when this plague is over and they're on their downward slope, that I believe the church will grow in China because of what God is doing right now. This is here in America. This is from an article on ABC News. It says a 68-bed makeshift hospital is expected to open in Central Park on Tuesday in an effort to ease some of the strain on the city's hospitals that have been bombarded with COVID-19 patients. This is being done, it says, this is Franklin Graham says, people are dying from the coronavirus, hospitals are out of beds, and the medical staff are overwhelmed. We are deploying our emergency field hospital to New York to help carry this burden. So this is Samaritan's Purse, just a Christian organization, and they are boots on the ground building hospitals. And I think it is absolutely incredible. Understand that when these things happen, God is not silent. God does not sit back on his throne and stop working. I think the opposite is true. This is where we see Christianity come to life. This is where we see you and I make a difference in the world around us. I have talked to some of you who said, man, I've had people bring me food. I've had people bring me groceries. Man, we are in on this. And even though on the surface it seems like chaos, underneath it all, I believe God is moving. Dreas, what are some things that families can do, teenagers can do, kids can do? What can we do to be the hands and feet of Christ whenever chaos like this is happening?
Well, really, I think this is something that I got from my mom. We just want to act cheery around people. We do not have to be scared of this. We don't have to be proud of it. We don't want to be happy that this is happening, but we don't have to be scared of it either. So sometimes you can just, if you're having to go to the grocery store or something, then just go on, act normal as if nothing bad's happening. Don't shy away from anybody or something. Just do it as if it was normal. Smile. Make people feel more confident. And then that can be good for other people and put a good reputation for God.
That's good. You know, I want to close with this. I do believe all the stats are telling us things are going to get worse. Some people I trust tell me that here in Idaho, the peak of our deaths and infections won't be till another couple weeks away. And so we're still on that up ramp. So unfortunately, barring God doing something miraculous that we're all praying for, barring that, things are probably going to get worse before they get better. As of now, we've had a few people at Revive tested. They have all come back negative, but that's going to change. There's some of us that are going to have COVID-19 probably. And so we're prepared for that. We're prepared to help. We're prepared to help financially, prepared to help however you need help. We're here for you. But I'm telling you, friends, family, Christians, as things get worse, the opportunities for us to be the hands and feet of God increase. They increase. There's more opportunities for us to do amazing things. Don't forget, God is still moving. And you may not see it, but below the surface, He is still changing hearts and changing minds and bringing people back to Himself. Again, I pray you will join us next week for Easter as we celebrate a resurrected Savior and talk about the Passover Lamb from 1 Corinthians chapter 5 and how Christ is that Passover Lamb for us. So we hope to see you next week. Dre, thanks for joining me. God bless you guys. Take care.